So, good afternoon, bitches. I'm going to review AEW Dynamite for this week. And I also want to mention that, I went down to, the Phoenix, Arizona show, and the crowd was really strong and really, really hot for the show. So, a lot of people are just saying, and the consensus really on the street is that, people just want Hangman Adam Page to win the AEW championship. And that's going to create a lot of goodwill for the company. So, I really just hope that no matter what, that happens really. And ultimately, the word for Tony Khan this year is the P word, not Poo-Tang Pie. It's pivot. Can they pivot from Darby versus Moxley? Because nobody really wants to see that. So I really hope the next couple of weeks that they make that happen. They plant a lot of seeds of doubt, and then they surprise you. But also, my hope is the next 7 weeks they build up all the other matches. It's not something like with this show and other shows where it's like you don't know what else is going to happen outside of a few things. Really, they have to kind of make sure that there's a lot of stories going into the show. But overall, this week I like this episode of Dynamite. I would say that it was one of the stronger episodes because I just like how they don't have way too many matches. They don't have way too many tag team or triple team matches going on for a long time. And I also liked how they had the main event where the main event wasn't a match, because sometimes you have to shows where that is just talking just to break up the continuity really. So I like the structure of the show, but I do feel it really lacked, in my opinion, just setting up more matches. So I don't want to kind of see multiple weeks with no matches being built towards AEW All In. There should be at least 12 matches or 14 matches maximum, since this is like their WrestleMania level show. So it opens with Hangman Adam Page being invited to the ring by Tony Schiavone. I was happy that Hangman wore the Owen Hart Championship, because the thing about it is that you got to just show that it's really important. It's just like with how in WWE, if somebody wins the Andre the Giant memorial trophy, they're gonna have it down in the ring or other things like that. You just don't act like it doesn't exist. So I'm happy that he's wearing that. That's part of the tradition, and that's good. There's a lot of "you deserve it" chants. There's a lot of cowboy shit chants. So it's a hint to Tony Khan to say, hey, you know what? Don't break people's hearts. We gotta just make sure that this happens, that he does become the champion at All In Texas, and it's just like a restart. And he said some very poignant things. Defeat and being on top of the world is fleeting. What you decide to do with winning and losing matters. Will Ospreay, thank you for the fight of my life. Why I do this, and why you can be the man to also lead the company forward. And he also says that when the AEW Championship, it's about competition, compassion, creativity, human dignity, and all those good things, And Adam Page says to the audience, you know what, I'm basically, you're basically my boss. So I promise the audience, you people who are my boss, that I, Adam Page, in 7 weeks, I will win the championship. It is a promise that I will keep. He's very emphatic. He really wants this. He's very moved. And like I said, it's a really great promo. We're establishing that he's like the biggest main character in this 7 week story of if he's going to win the championship, or is going to be a situation where he doesn't win. Swerve Strickland comes out and he shows footage of the Young Bucks at Dynasty. What the Young Bucks said, which was that there's old footage of them saying that they did cause interference and cost Swerve the AEW championship because they're doing it for Hangman Adam Page. And then also he really says to Adam Page, hey, you know what? Swerve Strickland says to Adam Page, hey, so were you the mastermind behind the Young Bucks sabotaging me? And what Adam Page said, if I really wanted them to sabotage you, if I really want somebody to sabotage you for you not to be champion, I would have done it myself. And by the way, this is all paraphrasing. And Swerve is like, like that's just bullshit. And then what happens is Will Ospreay comes out. And Will Ospreay says, Swerve, you're like an older brother to me. Hangman cares about this place. Both of you picked me up when I lost, and shook my hand. So there's something about that I can. He's really just saying that my intuition. I have really good intuition. My intuition is that Hangman really cares about this place. I like what he said, which is allegorical. People are starting to believe in this place again. We got one shot to make Hangman the champion. So, really, what Will Ospreay's trying to say is that they need to help they need to help Hangman be champion, because obviously you see how all these Moxley matches end with a lot of interference and all that stuff, and then also it's for the greater good, is for AEW. So Swerve bitch slaps the microphone um, out of Ospreay's hands and says, he'll never work with him. Hangman, I'll never. And he also says, I'll never work with that man, because sometimes I've seen people do this with children that are just being bad. They'll say they'll say I'm not gonna deal with this kid anymore when that's their own son. People just don't refer to that person as by their name or whatever, really. So I kind of was saying a couple of things that I think first of all, it almost feels a little bit like Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania 40, where I think they're going to have Swerve and Ospreay and the Dark Order and a few other people help Hangman out to fight off the Death Riders. But they also have to be really careful they're not doing it like WrestleMania 40, where you're kind of repeating the same type of long run into the ring and all that stuff. Don't do that. I'm predicting that they're going to help him out, and that's going to be that, because I think that with Tony, and having all these international shows and all this good stuff that's going on, they have to really just keep with the ticket sales and for everything. They really have to make a moment that's going to send people home happy. And I think they're close to 20,000. I think they're at 18,000 now. But they have to send people home happy. They don't want a large crowd booing. And like I said, the Cowboy has to win in Texas, or else it's a bad look for all the Texans and everything like that. I even said to myself that maybe what you can do is that Forbidden Door, you can have Swerve versus Hangman versus Ospreay, because they do have a story together, and I think that would be a very great Forbidden Door main event, and that would be something really nice and really cool. And I really think what they're doing right here is they're planting seeds of doubt to say, hey, Swerve is just going to restart his feud with Hangman, and that's going to take the title off of him. In my opinion, and I've said this very good, that Moxley needs to be feuding with Eddie Kingston now, and if not Eddie Kingston, if he's injured, it has to be Mark Briscoe. Because what happened during the AEW show. So I think that's a better feud than Moxley holding the title to Darby Allin. I think that it is time that they pivot. So this is a really great opening promo. You had all your biggest stars. You saw you saw where they're at, really. Adam Page wants to be the champion, despite what was said about him backstage. And Ospreay backstage. Ospreay wants Hangman to be the champion. Is this guy can't do it alone because of the Death Riders and all those other people. And it's clear because every single time they have a big option or a championship match, they cause interference. And Swerve's well, fuck Hangman. Either I'll sabotage him or I won't go out there and help him become champion, even if it's for the better good, even if it's for people to believe in AEW again. So like I said, playing seeds of doubt. So that's kind of the main story of can they can Swerve and Will and Hangman come together for the greater good of AEW, or can they not come together and then AEW's not gonna have a great moment. So it's a great it's a great usage of playing seeds of doubt. So the next match was Moxley, Gabe Kidd, Maria Shavir versus Mark Briscoe, Hong Kong Phooey, and Willa Nightingale. So in this triple threat match, there's a lot of great offense. While Gabe Kidd and Briscoe were fighting in the ring, a lot of people were fighting outside. Briscoe sets up a chair and does the diving Gabe Kidd and John Moxley. Gabe Kidd is an exploder and inverted Uranagi suplex. Mark Briscoe does a missile drop kick on Moxley. No, I'm sorry. Speedball Mike Bailey. I'm gonna call him Hong Kong Fooey now from now on. Hong Kong Fooey does a missile drop kick, running shooting star press to the Enziguri. Will hits a spine buster on um, Marina Shafir. Gabe Kidd gets help from we get Wheeler Yuta and throws Mark Briscoe into the timekeeper area. Gabe Kidd and Will Nightingale are like Gabe Kidd and Will Nightingale. They're kind of teasing that they hate each other. So I was saying to myself, what would happen if they had a intergender match really between Will Nightingale and Gabe Kidd? That could be something really interesting. Um, and then also, Mark Briscoe does a drop kick between the second and third rope, and then Speedball, Hong Kong Fooey does a moonsault into the ringside area. Commander does a top rope walk and dive onto Claudio. I was not happy with Commander interfering. I know why they did that, because they wanted to advertise the match for this weekend, where it's Commander versus Claudio. The winner enters a fatal four-way match for the International Championship. But I felt that this was a little too Marvel versus Capcom, where in Marvel vs. Capcom, like there's a lot of like guest characters and whatever in those matches. So I felt like like this felt like a little out of the blue, really. Mox hits a paradigm shift and a bulldog choke on. Um, he hits that on. Yeah, he hits that on Mark Briscoe, and that ends the match. I felt there was too much interference. I appreciate setting up possible feuds and directions. I also like the cutaway to Chris Statlander, and this is what AEW has been doing very well, which is what they try to do with you guys, with the audience, is they try to set up different directions. They try to say, is it going to go this way or that way? For example, with like I said about Hangman Adam Page, there's multiple directions. It could be Swerve and Will Ospreay helping him out. It could be them betraying him. It could be a match of the Young Bucks versus Ospreay and Swerve. It could also be Hangman Adam Page joining the Young Bucks and the Moxley faction with the title. There's different directions that can happen. And also, when you look at this, you don't know what could happen next. It could be, like I said, it could be Marina Shafir versus Will Nightingale. It could be Gabe Kidd versus Will Nightingale. It could be another, it could even be Blood and Guts at the big show of the year, really. So there's some ideas about where this match could lead to, the feud that it could possibly lead to. Or it could be Chris Statlander and Will Nightingale versus Marina Shafir and possibly Gabe Kidd or something like that, because I think Gabe Kidd to me sounds like a controversial wrestler, so I think that he'll probably do something like that. They had a Hurt Syndicate promo, and it always puts a smile on my face, because I think I just like the charm of the charm of MJF, and also just MVP, because they know how to play off each other very well, really, and it's also good chemistry because they're both loudmouths, but they know how to act in unison, really. So yeah, it was good. And also the next match with Harley Cameron and Anna Jay versus Penelope Ford and Mega Bane, rematch from 8 Double or Nothing, but this time it's a no DQ. And before that match they mentioned that Ricochet is looking to start his own faction, So, again, Ricochet's done a lot for the company. He's a really great heel. So, what's been good is that you showed, a bunch of different people that matter to the company. You're not starting the match with, Emi Sakura versus Mercedes Moné, because who the fuck is Emi Sakura? So you're kind of consistently seeing people in this that are built and that you care about and actually mean something. So that consistency is good. And then what happened was that they had the match, and I kind of was saying to myself, there's a rumor that there's going to be women's tag team titles, and I have no problem with that, because there's a lot of women on Ring of Honor, Collision, and AEW Dynamite, so they need to restructure the women's division. I have no problem with a women's tag team division, and they defend it on all 3 shows or something like that. It's like a workhorse title. It can lead to a bunch of good things. but I can understand why people may say that could lead to a bunch of bad things as well. So Harley Cameron and Anna Jay wear matching cowgirl uniforms. That's been like a theme tonight. Is a lot of that cowgirl, oh rat, oh giggity giggity, and they both come down with like large wooden boards. Both hit Megan Bain with a chair pipe and the wooden boards, and they both hit like a big board, no, a big boot Russian leg sweep combination to Penelope Ford onto a chair. Harley Cameron hits a power bomb on Megan Bain through a table. Megan Bain and Penelope Ford are taking a lot of damage to the match. Megan Bain slams Harley Cameron onto the ring steps, and Harley Cameron like busts her nose. So I'm not sure this is real or not, but yeah, it looked very very fucking real because they can easily blade her. She could have easily put like a blood capsule up her nose, really, but that looked very very brutal. And some people are saying that she has a concussion, but she has a massive nosebleed. Anna Jay hits a gory bomb on Penelope Ford onto a chair. There's also a rumor that Anna Jay got injured, and Megan Bain and Penelope Ford hit Anna Jay throw Anna Jay onto a chair. Very back and forth, and it was a very thrilling match. Megan Bain and Penelope Ford set up a European uppercut Harley Cameron, and she gets the pinfall. So this was really great because a lot of people like Harley Cameron, so she deserves a pinfall. And also, these girls do have really great chemistry with each other. Like, I think that the match was kind of epic. It sold Megan Bain as somebody who needs to take a lot of damage. So I really just think that there could be a story and a feud with them, if you kind of want to build to like a women's tag team match. Some people were saying that Penelope Ford is a little like sloppy and other things like that. It never hurts for her to take some more classes on how to wrestle. And I think with professional wrestling, if I'm correct, Maven even talked about this, that sometimes when producers and Tony Khan watches matches, and that happens in WWE with Vince and other people, like they may say, okay, well, this person needs to do some homework. This person needs to have like more matches on, more like we need to send this person to wrestling school, during the week, and then we need to kind of build up to a story so they're always consistently improving. So I think like Penelope Ford might need some drills and other things like that. So so that was so like if she can improve or be forced to improve, that could be good. And I said like to myself, what would happen if they set up that there's going to be a tournament for women's tag team titles, and you have like some matches on Ring of Honor and other things like that, and you set up a contendership at Ring of Honor, Death Before Dishonor, and then at the show All In, you set up like that. Like that would be a good usage of Harley Cameron and Penelope Ford and Megan Bain and Anna Jay. I mean, Anna Jay, Harley Cameron, Megan Bain, Penelope Ford. So they could have easily set up something. And like I said, you guys got 8 weeks, so I really don't want to see last minute matches. Let's not repeat the issue of Double or Nothing. The next match was the Ops versus the Frat House. And I was saying to myself, like, the Frat House did a really good job being funny and entertaining. And I kind of said to myself that this show did not have a lot of comedy in it. I'm happy. Like, this was kind of like the Jackass 48-hour film project dumbass comedy. But the thing about it was that they saved it for the Frat House. They had one segment and then they got their asses kicked. So I felt like it wasn't like the main event of Double or Nothing Anarchy in the Arena, where they were putting comedy in that when it wasn't the right tone, really. So they're jobbers. Jobbers can be funny. So I was okay with them. I was really okay with that. And then they announced it's Adam Cole versus Kyle Fletcher for the TNT Championship. I was like saying, oh man, like this should be a match at All In. Imagine how great that would be. I was saying but I was happy that this happened. Like I really want Kyle motherfucking Fletcher to win that title from Adam motherfucking Cole. I like Adam Cole. He has very beautiful eyes and stuff like that. I'm not no homo, but the man has some really beautiful eyes, and honestly, he has a charm that any girl would fall from him. Again, no homo. But Kyle Fletcher's really awesome. He's cool. Kyle Fletcher's done a lot for the company. He really should be the Ring of Honor champion, or he should hold the TNT championship, and really just have a direction. Give him like a couple months to see what he can do with it. And then maybe in the future you can have him win the Continental Classic or maybe the Casino Gauntlet at the All In shows. Like he does have a future. You need to give him a title reign and see if he can elevate that title. And that's the test to see if he can be an AEW champion in the future. They interviewed, well, after they announced that, they interviewed Jamie Hayter, and then the lights go out, and then there's this woman named the Toxic Spider, Thekla, if I'm saying her name right, or Thekla, and she attacks Jamie Hayter, and then also she does like the spider, like, bend over type of thing, really, the spider walk. So I kind of was saying to myself, I'm happy they mentioned that she was fired for attacking the president of, I think, Stardom. So to me, I'm okay with that because that mentions that she's kind of like a badass. And I also think with the women's division, they really need to start releasing a lot of like the women on the roster, and they also need to start keeping the people that they should keep and getting new people. Like they need to start revising the women's division. And I really want to say that from now until AEW, All In, they should have like at least 3 to 4 women's matches. They should build some feuds. Like Willow and Marie Shafir should be something. It also should be Mercedes and Tony Storm, which they're working on, and then it should be, maybe Jamie Hayter versus Thekla, and they can also have like maybe Harley Cameron and Anna Jay in the tag team, women's tag team division, and really show that with women's wrestling that they can have stories, they can have things that matter really. So this is ultimately like one of the things I want to get out of this is saying, hey, the women's division actually has a couple of directions. They did a promo of Mystico CMLL, so I was saying to myself, like I pray that they're going to do Mystico versus Will Ospreay at AEW Grand Slam. And I'm a little annoyed by this. I've said this many, many times. AEW Grand Slam is in like 2 to 3 weeks. And this is a show that you sold out. And this is a show you should be celebrating, be very, very proud of, because it's a very, very fucking big deal. You sold out in Mexico. What would happen if you did Forbidden Door in Mexico in 2016? That would be something. So make that show a big deal. If you wanted to set up Mystico versus Will Ospreay as the main event of AEW Grand Slam, I would have given them a lot of points tonight. So they should. And then they're also going to do Ring of Honor in Mexico as well, really. So there's a lot of just shit that they should be, working on. And then the next match was Kyle Fletcher versus Adam Cole for the TNT Championship. Adam Cole does a thrust kick, sending Kyle Fletcher out of the ring. Kyle Fletcher does a super kick, power bomb on the ring apron to Adam Cole. I know some people don't like that spot because they say, hey, that's too dangerous. I can understand that. I don't like the finisher Kyle Fletcher has, where it's almost like he does like a spinning power bomb on the turnbuckle, like to his opponent. Like he did that to Brody King. I was like, damn, Brody King's lucky that he didn't walk away injured from that, because that's a little too dangerous. Power bomb on the ring apron, I can understand that being a little too dangerous. Kyle Fletcher runs into a super kick. Adam Cole hits him with the Panama Sunrise. And then later on in the match, Josh Alexander causes a DQ. Josh Alexander and Kyle Fletcher attack Adam Cole. Brody King makes the save, really. So you can set up to Kyle Fletcher versus Brody King in the future. And then also with Brody King, he's been very directionalist. So him feuding the Don Callis family, okay, I'm cool with that. The next thing is that you can even do a match where it's like Brody King and the House of Black team up with the Paradigm, and then they have like a feud with the Don Callis family, maybe in Blood and Guts or something like that. There's something that you can do with that to go down an interesting direction. But I was also happy with this too, because obviously, they don't do a lot of disqualifications or interference disqualifications in AEW, so that's a good direction. And then also too that Adam Cole got ambushed by, Kyle Fletcher got ambushed by Adam Cole, so I'm happy that they're setting up a feud and storyline. Like, this is not done with. So I'm like saying, you could set up a feud leading to All In, and hopefully they do that. And I think that's what they're going to do, really. And this is also good because they moved on from Kyle Fletcher versus Will Ospreay. This has been something they've been doing for almost a year, if I'm correct, close to a year, or 6 or 7 months, really. So this is saying Kyle Fletcher is now with Adam Cole, and that's where it needs to be. So they're not kind of going back to that for a while, because that's just not, that's just too redundant. And AEW has had a redundancy issue. The next match was Josh Alexander versus Brody King. international tournament match. And I was gonna say and I was gonna say, oh, this is the main event. I was like saying that's a bad main event because that doesn't because nobody really knows who these guys are really. And that's not a good main event of the show. But then I realized it's Toni Storm versus Mercedes Moné promo. I'm okay with that because that's one of your big matches of the year, and you need to have something that's really big as the main event. Really, I think that um, I don't mind this being the main event. Really, Toni Storm is a draw, so I was happy that they took the main event very well tonight. It wasn't like a random match. It's not like Hechicero versus I think Dorado or whatever his name is from CMLL like that for the for an opportunity at Kenny Omega's International Championship. That would be an example of a bad one. But Josh Alexander versus Brody King, I was very happy with Josh Alexander because, like I said about him in TNA wrestling, he was the champion for over 500 days, I believe, and he did have a lot of great matches. So I don't want to see him palling around the Don Callis family, or he's almost like a minion of that. He needs to start having, he needs to be like Takeshita, or he needs to break out and have really great matches, show what he can do really, because that's really he has to really earn that paycheck, show what he can do as a performer, and he needs to be in that role really. Otherwise, he's wasting his time. So I'm happy with that because he is kind of like a powerhouse. He's like if you took Ryback's blood and Kurt Angle's blood and you made a wrestler polymerization. So and Josh Alexander is a really great wrestler. So he needs, and also Brody King did a great job. Like this was like a big man, big body, big beefy badass beefy men match. Big man slapping man meat type of match. Josh Alexander chokes Brody King with his T-shirt. Brody King does a back body drop. I think it's called the Centaurian blows. Brody King does. Then he choke slams Josh Alexander on the barricade. Josh Alexander does a back body drop. Josh Alexander does a body block between the first and second rope. They exchange clotheslines. Josh Alexander hits a German suplex on the apron. Brody King does his running crossbody, which is a really sick move. Brody King wins with a Gonzo bomb, and Josh Alexander bleeds in the ring. And I was actually very, very surprised that Josh Alexander won because I was surprised that Josh Alexander lost and Brody King won because Brody King usually loses a lot. And then also when you do a fatal 4-way match, you don't usually have a baby face against a baby face. You usually do either a wrestler who doesn't really matter that much, or you do like a bunch of heels. So I was very surprised to see Brody King win. And then also there was a lot of blood all over the ring. And I want to say during the main event they talked about blood, sweat, and tears. So it was kind of interesting how they had blood in the ring, and then they didn't clean that up really. It kind of fit like what they're talking about in the main event. It was actually bad because Toni Storm, without her realizing it or paying attention to it, was rolling around in the blood of Josh Alexander during the main event, even though it was all dried up at that point. Still, as somebody who works in the hospital, that's not a good call. But they had Kyle Fletcher saying he didn't need any help or any interference, really, and he's kind of blaming not winning the title on the Don Callis family for interfering, and then he gets attacked by Adam Cole, really. So it's playing seeds of doubt. Is Kyle Fletcher going to is Kyle Fletcher going to abandon the Don Callis family, but he got attacked by Adam Cole, so now it's just going to be Adam Cole versus Kyle Fletcher for a while, which I think could be a great feud. Sorry. And the main event was Mercedes Moné and the Toni Storm promo. And earlier today they showed Mercedes Moné in like a cowgirl outfit, and she's going in the car in the lowrider. Toni Storm, like, she looks like Marilyn Monroe because Marilyn Monroe has done some like photo shoots on the beach, kind of wearing like those 1940 beach trunks type of thing. So it's like Marilyn Monroe versus the cowgirl. So Marilyn Monroe mentions that that girl has been undefeated for a long time. What took you so long for to reach out to me for a match? And then Toni Storm says, I'm the Toni Storm Professional Wrestling. You've never reached out to me for a match. And Mercedes Moné says, we will have the greatest women's match at All In. Mercedes Moné, she doesn't mention why she did not reach out to Toni Storm like for such a long time, really, because she's been like a belt collector. Why didn't she reach out to Tony Storm for a while? She could have easily said something like, you know what, I wanted it all for a long time, really, or I wanted to beat you on the big stage to embarrass you. Like I wanted to win the greatest women title, or the greatest women's title at the greatest show of the year. So, like she should have been saying that type of stuff to kind of like throw that in there. So I kind of blame her for not putting that in there. Tony Storm, in All In, we can show who we are meant to be. While he says Tony Storm says in AEW, we can show who we are meant to be. Um, while you want all the titles, all I want is one title. And then she says something like, if you want to ride the money train into the Tony Storm tunnel, like her sexual innuendo stuff. And then she also says something like, when we had the greatest women's match of all time, um, this is what Tony Storm says, when we have the greatest women's match of all time, somewhere a little girl will say, holy shit, these bitches are crazy. And that I'm a little crazier than you. And he says also, and she also says, Mercedes Moné, unfortunately for you, Mercedes Moné, I happen to be timeless. It was a great promo because obviously they're both over the top, egomaniac characters. So I'm definitely okay with this. And then also too, like I said, for a main event of a show, it should be leading to matches at All In. So I don't mind this. I think that you should have had this open the show, and the main event should have been Adam Page and Swerve Strickland, and I think that would have been a better structure, really. Because one thing that's been killing AEW, and one thing that's been really, really bad about AEW has been like how they've been structuring their shows. Because sometimes main events should be having the right matches, the right cliffhangers, the right people. Um, just like in a pay per view, like you won't have Tony Storm, because there's a rumor about Tony Storm and Mercedes Moné headlining All In, because WWE is doing like a women's only show the day after, and they should not main event the show because they're not the biggest story. Mariah May and Tony Storm should have main evented Revolution, because at that point, that was kind of like the biggest thing in the company. So there are times when there's times when the main event match should not be the heavyweight title, and there's times when it should be, but All In should not be. I don't mind like for some like TV shows where it opens the show, and I think that I'm okay with this week. It opening the show really because the main event was another really big match really, and sometimes you gotta like show to the audience, okay, women can main event a show really. It's not always the guys really, so I'm okay with that. This being the main event. But in the future, it really should be, the issue around the Death Riders and John Moxley and Hangman Adam Page. That should be main eventing most of the shows really, because that's the most important thing. Um, and I also would say that you know I really like the promo, and then also too with Mercedes Moné and Tony Storm, they have an issue with dumb and stupid comedy, but really they're trying to establish their characters. Like they're both really ego driven. They both are kind of power hungry. Tony Storm is like a power hungry, like diva and narcissist and Sunset Boulevard. Like she kind of wants to be like this, all about me. That's Tony Storm. And then you have Mercedes Moné, who wants to collect all the titles. She wants to kind of have the biggest moments, and all that stuff really. So it's both like two ego driven bitches. So that's okay with me. That's okay with me. So overall, I really like the show. And also, too, they had a great structure in the sense of matches. You had your opening with a promo, you had the ending with a promo, so that's good symmetry. You had a tag team and trios match. The trios match was like a squash match, because sometimes you do multiple tag team matches and multiple trios matches and multiple like 8-man or 12-man matches. It's very taxing on the audience when you just do too much of that. You had a good amount of promos. You had a squash match. And you had like a match that people wanted to see with Kyle Fletcher versus Adam Cole. So overall, like I enjoyed the show. I know some people didn't, but as I said, and I'll say it before and I'll say it again, the big thing is that they really have to start setting up matches to All In within the next 7 weeks. Like I think within every single week they should be announcing a match, or it should be kind of like evident to people where it's going to go. Really, I do not want to see the next I don't want to see two like the penultimate show like 2 weeks remaining, a bunch of matches being announced really. And also they need to maybe say something like, hey, you know what? Maybe we're going to set up Okada versus Kenny Omega at Fighter Fest after Kenny Omega retains. Hey, at AEW Grand Slam in Mexico, it's going to be announced that it's going to be, a team of CMLL wrestlers versus a team of AEW wrestlers at All In, really, and for people who can travel from Mexico City to Dallas Fort Worth. I think that they should be doing something like that. So, and then also they have like a Fighter Fest in I think Portland, Oregon. They should be like, hey, we should set up maybe the Ops versus the Don Callis family, or the Ops versus uh, the Death Riders. So like every single week, just set up matches and build stuff, and also set up matches on Collision to All In. Make sure people understand that Collision matters. You can do something where Athena announces that she's going to defend her title at All In after defending on Death Before Dishonor, really. So there is a lot of things that they can kind of do to make sure that they can show to the audience. We can build stuff over the next couple of weeks. We can make this really has to feel like a WrestleMania show. They need to have WrestleMania type of results, really, where it's big moments. It's setting up the people, setting up your wrestlers for you're setting up your future as well. Where like Kyle Fletcher, Anthony Bowens, should be set up for the future. Harley Cameron, and a few other ones as well, really. And also, like as I said, 100%. On the three-way story between Hangman, Ospreay, and Swerve Strickland, that has to be like the main. That has to be like the main event feud. And like I've said before, and I'll say it again, what they can do is that they have Hangman win, and then he says, you know what, guys, let's do a triple threat at AEW Forbidden Door, and then you have Hangman retain, and then what you do is at All In, at All Out, it's going to be MJF versus Hangman Adam Page, and then you do Darby Allin at Wrestle Dream, and then at maybe what's that fucking show at the very end of the year? You have at Full Gear. You can do Anthony Bowens, or you can do or Kenny Omega, or you could do Gabe Kidd or somebody else, really, and have Hangman hold the title for like about a year, then you give it to Will Ospreay next year. So there's a lot of things that they can kind of really do in that direction, really. And as I said, I don't think Moxley, if they have Moxley as champion, they have to set up Moxley versus Eddie Kingston, or Moxley versus Kenny Omega. No, Moxley versus Ospreay, then Moxley versus Kenny Omega, Moxley versus Eddie Kingston, Moxley versus Darby Allin, and that'd be that, really. So it's gonna be really interesting to see what they do the next couple of months with whoever's the champion. But overall, I really like the show, and I'm happy to dissect and analyze it. And also, I want to just mention to you guys is that I'm going to be putting a lot more effort into my reviews of AEW, because I've been seeing a lot of different channels of people reviewing AEW, and I want to just work a lot harder because, I've been going through PTSD from bullying and other things that have happened to me in my life, and I've learned just to forgive people who have hurt me and move forward, and that's allowed my brain to be a lot clearer. And on a personal note, I did a competition called the 48-Hour Film Project. I dealt with racism, and I dealt with bullying, and at one film event, I shared that I struggled with suicide and depression. I remember like the event runners making fun of it and treating me like I was a special needs student, like sharing too much about myself. So that gave me anger and PTSD for a lot of years. But I've learned to say I'm going to forgive, really. But I have no problem saying, hey, with the 48-Hour Film Project, as a competition that is supposed to be for everybody. The first year I did it, people were pointing their fingers at me and saying, "Hey, it's great that a black man's doing it. Why don't you want to do the competition?" Is it that black people want to work with other black people? And I dealt with like many people who took advantage of me because they thought that I was autistic and I was special needs and I can be treated whatever type of way, really. So I've learned to forgive, and that's allowed me to be more productive in my wrestling reviews and my travel videos and other things like that. And I also put it out there to say, hey, as a competition, there needs to be more education on the fact that it's not a competition for everybody, and people should be really exposed to how things are done in that type of competition, so you don't get hurt again, or you're kind of aware of issues within that. But that's really hurt my productivity for a long time, but I'm not going to allow that to run my life anymore. So I think I'm just gonna be like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna do more travel videos. I'm gonna travel to more AEW events. I'll go into Mexico City. I'm gonna go to Dallas. I'm hopefully gonna go to London and Toronto and do more travel videos, but also more AEW reviews. And we're gonna take it from there, really. You know, so you're gonna see a lot more quality. You're gonna see a lot more charm. I want to have my 1,000 subscribers. I want to have more subscribers. I want a life where I'm doing like AEW reviews and other wrestling show reviews and travel videos. So I'm gonna bring the best motherfucking quality that I can, and fuck the bullies and fuck other people for holding me back, and fuck myself for holding myself back. You know, I'm gonna bring out bigger and better with these reviews and all this stuff for you guys.